When we talk about leadership, many people immediately picture a position, a microphone, a title on a business card, or a nameplate on a door. We imagine leadership as something granted to us by others, by an organization, by society, by circumstance. But that understanding quietly removes responsibility from us. Because if leadership is a title, then we can always say, "That's not my role," or "That's not my place." And that mindset is precisely what keeps potential leaders silent. The reality is far more challenging and far more empowering. Leadership is a choice you make long before anyone recognizes it, and often when no one is watching. Every meaningful form of leadership begins internally. It starts at the moment you decide that you will not simply react to life, but respond with intention. It is the decision to stand for what is right, even when it costs you comfort. It is the decision to step forward when everyone else is waiting for someone else to move first. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become a leader because someone handed you authority. You wake up and decide, "I will take responsibility for what is in front of me." That is the first step, and it is the hardest one. Some of the most influential leaders in history did not begin with influence. They began with conviction. They led families before they led communities. They led their own behavior before they led movements. They corrected themselves before correcting others, and that is why their leadership endured. When leadership is rooted in choice rather than position, it doesn't disappear when the applause fades or the role changes. It becomes part of who you are. This is why waiting to be chosen is such a dangerous trap. If you are waiting for permission to lead, you may wait your entire life. Leadership does not ask for permission, it asks for courage. It asks you to say, "If I don't step up here, then who will?" That might look like speaking truth in a difficult conversation, holding yourself to a higher standard when cutting corners would be easier, or taking initiative in a moment where silence would be safer. These are not glamorous moments, but they are defining ones. And here is the irony. Once you choose to lead, recognition often follows, but it can never be the motivation. The moment leadership becomes about status, it loses its moral center. Real leadership is service disguised as strength. It is responsibility disguised as influence. It is the quiet resolve to do what needs to be done because it needs to be done, not because someone is keeping score. So understand this clearly. Leadership is not about where you stand. It is about what you stand for. And the moment you choose responsibility over comfort, action over excuses, and purpose over fear, you have already begun to lead, whether the world notices it yet or not. One of the defining moments in a person's life is when they realize that comfort and leadership rarely coexist. Comfort tells you to stay quiet, to blend in, to avoid risk, to protect yourself. Leadership, on the other hand, calls you to step forward when it would be easier to step back. It asks you to carry weight that you could have chosen to avoid. And this is why so many people admire leadership from a distance but hesitate to embrace it personally, because responsibility is heavy and comfort is familiar. Choosing responsibility means refusing the temptation to say, "It's not my problem." That phrase may protect your peace in the short term, but it slowly erodes your integrity. Every community, every organization, every family weakens not because of a lack of talent, but because too many capable people decide that someone else will handle it. Leadership begins when you look at a problem and say, "If I can do something about this, then I must," even if that something feels small, even if it goes unnoticed, even if it costs you. Responsibility also means accepting that mistakes are part of the journey. Comfort demands perfection before action, but leadership understands that growth requires effort, failure, and learning. A leader does not wait until they are flawless to step up. They step up and refine themselves along the way. They take ownership not only of success, but of missteps, misunderstandings, and missed opportunities. There is a quiet dignity in saying, "That was on me, and I will do better." That sentence alone has restored trust and healed more divisions than 1,000 excuses ever could. And let us be honest, responsibility can be lonely. When you choose comfort, you blend into the crowd. When you choose responsibility, You often stand apart from it. You may be misunderstood. You may be criticized. You may be questioned for your intentions or your timing. But leadership has never been about popularity. It has always been about principle. The leaders who change environments are not the ones who seek approval, but the ones who are willing to be consistent even when approval is withheld. What makes this choice so powerful is that it compounds over time. Each time you choose responsibility over comfort, your capacity expands. Your character strengthens. Your presence becomes steadier. People begin to trust you, not because you are loud, but because you are reliable. Not because you promise ease, but because you embody accountability. And without realizing it, you become someone others look to in moments of uncertainty. So the question is never whether responsibility will cost you something. It always will. The real question is whether comfort is worth the cost of your potential. Because every time you choose responsibility over comfort, you are not just solving a problem in front of you. You are shaping the leader you are becoming. Before anyone ever follows you, they are watching how you lead yourself. This is an uncomfortable truth, but it is a necessary one. We often want influence outward before discipline inward. We want impact without introspection. But leadership that skips self-leadership is fragile. It may rise quickly, but it collapses just as fast. The strongest leaders you will ever encounter are not necessarily the loudest or the most visible. They are the most governed. Leading yourself begins with honesty. It is the courage to look at your own habits, intentions, and inconsistencies without excuses. It is easy to point out what others should fix. It is far harder to confront what we ourselves need to change. Yet this is where leadership is forged. When a person holds themselves accountable even when no one else is watching, they develop an inner authority that cannot be faked. People may not know your private struggles, but they always sense your inner discipline. Self-leadership also requires restraint. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every emotion deserves to be acted upon. Not every reaction deserves to become a response. A leader who cannot control their anger, ego, or impulses will eventually harm the very people they are meant to guide. Strength is not found in unfiltered expression. It is found in principled control. The ability to pause, reflect, and choose the higher path is one of the most underrated leadership skills, and one of the rarest. Then there is consistency. Anyone can act wisely on a good day. Leadership is revealed on the difficult ones. When pressure increases, standards are tested. When fatigue sets in, shortcuts become tempting. This is where self-leadership either holds or collapses. A leader who lives by fluctuating values creates confusion. A leader who lives by steady principles creates trust. And trust, once earned, becomes the foundation upon which influence naturally grows. Leading yourself also means committing to growth. The moment a person believes they have nothing left to learn, they have already begun to decline. Humility is not weakness, it is awareness. It is knowing that improvement is always possible and that guidance can come from unexpected places. Leaders who invest in their own learning sharpen their perspective, deepen their wisdom, and avoid the arrogance that blinds many talented people. And perhaps most importantly, self-leadership is about alignment. When your private life contradicts your public message, the gap will eventually be exposed. People may follow skill for a season, but they follow integrity for a lifetime. When your words and actions are in harmony, leadership flows naturally. You don't have to convince people. You simply live in a way that makes your values visible. So understand this. Before you ask anyone to believe in your vision, believe in your discipline. Before you ask anyone to follow your direction, follow your own principles. Because when you lead yourself with clarity and consistency, others won't need to be pushed to follow. You will pull them forward simply by who you are. Leadership without vision becomes management of the present, but leadership with vision dares to challenge the future. Vision is not simply about seeing farther than others. It is about believing in something before there is evidence to support it. And this is where courage becomes essential, because vision will always ask you to move before certainty arrives. If you wait until everything is clear, safe, and approved, you are not leading, you are following the momentum of others. Vision often begins as a quiet conviction. It is that inner awareness that things do not have to remain the way they are. But here is the difficulty: vision isolates before it inspires. In the beginning, you are usually the only one who can see it clearly. Others may question your motives, doubt your judgment, or remind you of why it hasn't worked before. Courage is not the absence of fear in these moments, it is the willingness to act despite it. Fear whispers, "What if you fail?" Courage responds, "What if I don't try?" Every leader who changed an environment had to withstand seasons of misunderstanding. Vision threatens comfort because it introduces change, and people are often more attached to familiarity than to growth. This is why courage is not just about bold action, it is about patience. It is the strength to hold steady when progress is slow and affirmation is scarce. Vision does not collapse because it is wrong. It collapses because the one carrying it becomes weary. Courage also demands clarity of intention. Vision that is rooted in ego will not survive pressure, but vision rooted in purpose endures resistance. When your goal is recognition, criticism will paralyze you. When your goal is impact, criticism becomes information. Leaders with courage are not defensive, they are reflective. They ask, is this opposition revealing a flaw in my approach, or is it simply discomfort with change? That discernment keeps vision sharp rather than reactive, and let us be clear, vision does not require dramatic gestures. Often, courage looks remarkably ordinary. It looks like continuing when no one applauds. It looks like refining your message again and again. It looks like staying committed when results lag behind effort. The most courageous leaders are not always the loudest. They are the most persistent. They understand that vision unfolds through consistency, not spectacle. What sustains courage over time is conviction. When you know why you are moving forward, you are less shaken by how long it takes to get there. Vision anchored in values creates resilience. It allows you to adjust strategy without abandoning direction. It allows you to grow without losing yourself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, others begin to see what you saw from the beginning. So remember this. Vision will always ask more of you before it gives anything back. But if you have the courage to walk toward what you believe before it is visible, you will eventually lead others to a future they could not yet imagine. Many people associate leadership with dramatic moments, decisions made in crises, speeches that stir emotion, bold moves that change direction overnight. But those moments, as important as they are not what ultimately define a leader's impact. Impact is shaped quietly, patiently, and consistently in the small choices that are made long before anyone is paying attention. Leadership is not built in bursts of intensity. It is built through sustained commitment. Consistency is what turns intention into credibility. Anyone can make a strong decision once. Anyone can be motivated for a season. But leaders are revealed by what they do repeatedly. When values are practiced daily, they become dependable. When standards are upheld even when it is inconvenient, they become trusted. People do not follow leaders because they are impressive. They follow leaders because they are predictable in the best possible way. They know what you stand for because you show them again and again. This is where many lose momentum. Consistent action rarely feels exciting. It often feels routine, even mundane. There are days when effort seems to outweigh results, when progress is slow and feedback is minimal. Comfort whispers that it would be easier to lower the standard just this once. But leadership understands that shortcuts may save time today while costing trust tomorrow. Small compromises rarely announce themselves as dangerous, but over time they erode integrity. Consistent leadership also requires patience with process. Growth is not linear. There are advances followed by setbacks, clarity followed by confusion. A leader committed to consistent action does not abandon direction because of temporary difficulty. They adjust their approach, but they do not abandon their principles. This steadiness becomes an anchor for others, especially in moments of uncertainty. When people see that your commitment does not fluctuate with circumstances, their confidence in your leadership deepens. It is also important to recognize that consistent action multiplies influence beyond what you can measure. The example you set today may not be acknowledged, but it is being observed. The discipline you model quietly shapes culture. The way you handle pressure teaches others how to respond under stress. Leadership is always teaching, even when it is silent. Over time, your actions speak so clearly that your words become secondary. And this is the hidden power of consistency. It removes the need for constant persuasion. When actions align with values over time, credibility speaks for itself. You no longer need to convince people of your intentions. They have seen the evidence. Trust is built not by grand promises, but by fulfilled ones. Not by intensity, but by endurance. So do not underestimate the power of showing up again tomorrow with the same commitment you had today. Leadership impact is not the result of one extraordinary decision, but of ordinary decisions made faithfully over time. And that is how influence becomes lasting. There is a moment, often quiet and unnoticed, when a single choice begins to ripple outward. Choosing to lead is never contained to the individual who makes that choice. It reshapes environments, shifts expectations, and redefines what others believe is possible. Leadership is contagious in the deepest sense. When one person raises their standard, others begin to question why they settled for less. When one person steps forward with clarity and courage, it disrupts the comfort of complacency around them. This is why choosing to lead is never a neutral act. It introduces responsibility into spaces that may have grown accustomed to avoidance. It introduces accountability where excuses once lived comfortably, and not everyone welcomes that disruption. But change has never required unanimous approval. It has always required someone willing to go first. Leadership does not wait for perfect conditions. It creates them through example. What makes this choice so powerful is that it transforms more than outcomes. It transforms identity. When you choose to lead, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop asking, "What can I get away with?" and start asking, "What is required of me here?" That internal shift changes how you speak, how you decide, and how you carry yourself. Over time, others sense that difference. They may not articulate it, but they feel it, and influence begins to grow not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Choosing to lead also reshapes culture. Cultures are not changed by policies alone. They are changed by patterns of behavior. When leadership is chosen consistently, standards rise naturally, integrity becomes expected, effort becomes normal, responsibility becomes shared. One person's decision to lead creates permission for others to do the same. Slowly, what once seemed exceptional becomes expected, and what once felt difficult becomes part of the identity of the group. And here is the deeper truth. Leadership changes futures. The decisions you make today echo into lives you may never meet. A word of courage can redirect a path. A standard upheld can prevent harm. A vision pursued can open doors for others long after you are gone. This is why leadership carries weight. It outlives the moment. It leaves fingerprints on stories that continue without you. But this transformation only begins when leadership is chosen deliberately. Not once, not when it is convenient, but again and again. The world does not change because people have potential. It changes because someone decides to activate it. Leadership is not destiny, it is decision, and every time you choose to lead, you push the world slightly closer to what it could be rather than settling for what it is. So remember this, when you choose to lead, you are not just stepping into a role. You are setting change in motion, and once that choice is made, everything around you begins to shift.